Hey guys, I'm Jordan with SOS Studio, and today we are building a DIY tube trap. And this is one of the most important things you can have for any mixing or recording or high-end listening studio room, anywhere where you want the music to sound good. And yet, most people don't use them. And why is that? It's because they're either super expensive or they're really difficult to build. So I am with my friend Corey today, who's going to help me build these. This is a two-person job. We've worked with an acoustician to come up with an idea, a schematic, that we could put together, and then we've made a couple DIY tweaks along the way where you'll have an option to go down route A or route B in order to reach the goals that you want to reach with your tube traps. So we're going to go through it right now. Here we go. So this is how it works. This is the outer absorption ring. This is exposed absorption here, and then we left the paper on in the back, and I'll tell you about that why later. All the frequencies that are coming at it from the outside either get absorbed by the absorption here, or they make their way through, or they bounce off the form and scatter throughout the room. So that's why it's called an active absorption. Great, now that we know what it does, let's talk about the materials that you need in order to build it to this specification. This is some high-performance fiberglass pipe insulation. This is John's Manville. It's 12 inches by 1 inch is the specifications you need, and I found that at a specialty insulation store nearby. This is a 12-inch concrete form that I got at my local home improvement store. It stands 4 feet tall, but we're going to cut a foot off of it so that we can use it for the DIY. This is a 36-inch wooden dowel. We got it square because we thought it would be a little more stable, and it's a 1 inch that we got from a home improvement store. You'll also need a sheet of rigid fiberglass. This is the 2-inch. A standard one is Corning 703. This is also a John's Manville. You'll need fabric or burlap in order to wrap your tube trap. I went for burlap because I thought it actually matched my studio pretty well. It has enough room to breathe, and it's 40 inches wide, which is the minimum you should get because this is 36 inches tall, and you need a couple inches on either end in order to wrap it around and secure it in place so that it looks good. Whatever fabric you choose, you need to make sure that it's acoustically transparent, which this burlap is. A good test is if you can breathe through it and feel your breath on your hand, or if you can talk into it and it sounds normal, then that means that the sound is traveling through just fine and will be absorbed by the tube trap. You also need end caps in order to hold this whole thing together. I found these discs online. They were specialty cut. These are made out of pine, and you can get them in a 15-inch diameter, but they were kind of expensive. So Corey and I went out and we found a large sheet of 5mm plywood. It's kind of flexible, but it's just thin enough that we could cut it ourselves, and we're going to show you how to make a template for that in just a moment. And lastly, we've got to get something to hold the fabric together. So I went out, I found these furniture nails that have got a nice decorative quality to them. And you can see that we just put them in here. It holds the fabric really nicely, and it still provides that nice finishing touch so that you can display it proudly in your room. Okay, so those are the materials that we need. Now we're going to go over the tools that you need to have on hand. Of course, you always need gloves, hearing protection, and eye protection because we're going to be dealing with insulation, which is airborne and will cut up your skin if you're not using gloves. And you need to have eye protection on because we're going to be using some saws. Next, you need a standard cordless drill. You're going to need a Phillips head drill bit. You're also going to need a 1.5-inch drill bit. This is called a spade bit or a paddle bit, depending on where you come from, Corey. You also need a cordless jigsaw in order to cut out the 15-inch discs. Of course, these are important for any project, but you need an X-Acto blade, some wood glue, some tape, and a pen. You need a staple gun with short staples, some sandpaper to get all those rough edges off of there. I'm using fabric scissors to actually cut the burlap. It made my job so much easier, and I highly recommend it if you have any fabric scissors lying around. And lastly, a chalk line. We're going to use this to make all of the marks really clear so that we can save a lot of time while we're actually cutting and measuring. So like I said, this is a two-person job. It makes the time go so much faster. This is my friend Corey. He's going to be helping me out with all of this, and he's the mastermind behind a lot of how this goes together. So two things I forgot to mention. You need a measuring tape, and you also need a flexible or fabric tape. It's going to help working with this concrete form that much more. It's really fantastic. So we're going to measure from the bottom up to 36 inches and make a mark there. And then we're going to go every 6 inches or so all the way around the tube, marking where 36 inches is. Let's rotate it. So we got everything all marked out. Now we're going to take our handy dandy chalk line and we're going to make a nice little line all the way through so that we can follow it with our jigsaw when we cut this at 36 inches. Alright, we've just made our chalk line all the way around. It's 360, so now we can follow it. We're going to make a small incision with the X-Acto blade along that line so that we can bring in the jigsaw and it will be able to go into place right on the line and give us a smooth cut. And now we're about to use a jigsaw, so of course always make sure to have eye protection.
Let's fly.
Great! So, the way that we're going to get the sound to travel through is we now need to drill some holes in here. Speaking with an acoustician, the best plan he came up with was drilling 1.5-inch holes every 8 inches vertically and horizontally. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a series of lines that we can track that are going to allow us to drill holes into it on a grid so that we know that everything is perfectly spaced out. This is basically just to have a starting point. And the standing ruler is just to make sure that it's flat because it's got the levels in here. If you've got another way to make your starting marks, then please go for it. You just want them to be perfectly across from each other so that what we do next, you know, is going to be equal all the way around. So this is where the fabric tape comes into play because we're going to go around the circumference of the tube trap and we're going to make a mark every 4 inches. And that's going to give us the columns that we need in order to drill the holes. So I'm holding the end of the tape right on the line that we just drew with the level so I know that it'll be equal on both sides. And every 4 inches. So we just did one side of this, and you're going to learn that one of the natures of the beast, it actually says here right on the concrete form, is that these are not guaranteed to be perfectly the same shape every time. Some are going to be slightly larger, some are going to be slightly smaller. So sometimes you're going to end with a perfect 4 inches each time all the way around, and on another form you might have a weird gap where it's 6 inches. Go ahead and put another column in at the 4-inch mark so that there might be 2 columns that only have 2 inches apart. It's not going to hurt anything, but just remember which side of the line you started on so that when you come over to this side, you can make sure that you're still lining up with the same marks where you were. Okay, so now we have our marks that are perfectly in line with each other from top to bottom, and now we're going to take our chalk line and connect those lines straight down the middle so that we have a perfectly vertical line connecting the two. So now we're going to lay down, we're going to take our measuring tape, and what we're going to do is on every line, we're going to mark every 8 inches, but we're going to alternate where we start. I'm going to 4 inches, 12 inches, 20, 28, and then on the next one, I'm going to 8, 16, 24, 32, and then I go back to the 4-inch, starting at the 4-inch mark. Okay, and now we're back at the beginning. We've got all of our lines marked, and we've got the increments line marked of 8 inches in between each mark, so that now we can go through and drill with our 1.5-inch drill bit on the line where it lines up with the arrow each time, and we'll have the perfectly placed holes all the way around the tube. And I just finished drilling all the holes, and now we have this nice Swiss cheese concrete form, and we know that all of the holes are perfectly 8 inches vertical and 8 inches horizontal.
Hey guys, so what we need to do now is to make the end caps, and the easiest way that we kind of figured out to do it is to make a template. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You can use what's called a scribe or a compass, or if you're like us and you're way too cheap to go out and buy that stuff, you can use a piece of rope or thread, in our case, a nail, and a pin. So what I did, we need a 15-inch disc. So I measured from the edge in 7.5 inches. I measured a 1/4 inch in on each side. That way I'm wasting the least amount of wood, getting the most for our money. And then you hook the loop around. You put the pin in. You want to kind of put your finger on it so it stays in the same spot. Keep a little tension. You don't want to pull too hard because then you'll stretch and then you're getting larger than 15 inches. And then you just start your circle. Try to make it as solid as possible. Okay, we got our template laid out. Now we're going to cut it with a jigsaw. Now that we've got our template cut out, we want to make sure that we don't get any splinters or rough edges and stuff, so I'm just going to take some sandpaper, go around the edges real quick. And that's it. So now that we have our template, we can take it, put it down on the board here, take our pen, and this goes a lot quicker than the string. There you go. It's like being back in kindergarten. And we just keep going around With a board like this where it's 4x4, we can actually get 9 end caps out of it without wasting much wood, so that's great.
So we've got our concrete form and we've got our end caps. Now we're going to prepare the absorption panel that's going to be on the inside of everything. I've measured 4 inches in from the outside, and then I've laid this 4-foot level in order to mark my guide while I cut it. And now lastly, we're going to take our wooden dowel and we're going to line it up with the end, and then we're going to cut our insulation so that it's lined up with this end as well. And there you have it. So now we're actually going to take these 2 strips of absorption and we're going to glue them to either side of the dowel so that it can be permanently affixed to the inside of the tube trap. You can be pretty generous with the glue here. If it spills out a little bit, that's not going to be a problem for anything inside. And because this fiberglass is nice and dense, you really can push on it to get that good seal. And there you go. Now we're going to let this dry for a few minutes while we go work on add the insulation and fabric to the outside of the concrete forms. So like I said earlier, we've got our absorption here, and the way that it's going to work is that half of it has to be exposed. So we're actually going to remove the paper from 180 degrees from the circumference and leave the paper on the back 180 degrees. So first, all of these come with this slit down the middle because they're meant to fit over industrial pipe. They're meant to open and put over a pipe, but we want that closed. So Corey's going to help me. I'm going to take off, it's got this adhesive strip here, we're going to take that off and make sure that we seal this up. Okay, so now that's nice and secure, and because the paper is actually glued to the fiberglass, we're going to turn this around 180 degrees and we're going to cut off the front half of it and leave that there. So now we've got the front 180 degrees of this exposed, but you'll see that this is flapping in the wind. So in order to make sure that that's nice and contained when we put the fabric on, we're going to put just a little bit of clear packing tape over the edges just to hold it in place until we get the burlap on. And there you have it. Now we're going to wrap the whole thing in the burlap. So before we put the burlap on, we need to put the concrete form inside so that we have something to attach the burlap to. So we got our spool of burlap. We're going to start at the seam and back where the tape went down. We're going to put the cut edge there, and then we're going to wrap it around all the way back. And it's okay to have a couple inches of overlap because we're going to attach it all with the finishing nails anyway. So good to have overlap so that we can make sure that we cover the whole circumference. Thank you. Excellent. Now we've got a cut. We're going to lay this down in order to put crows. We've got a little bit of overlap, and we found that it's much easier to put the nails in and to have everything be flat and nice and smooth if we lie it down, so we're going to do that now. And remember, we said that we want to have a couple inches on either side, so we want to place this right in the middle of the 40 inches to make sure that we have enough to wrap in and secure. So bring this up, put it right in the center. And this is the under panel, we'll call it. This is going to be on the inside of all of the burlap. So we're only going to put maybe 3 or 4 of the nails in here just to hold it in place so that while we pull the rest of the burlap tight, it will still have an anchor point. As you can imagine, it'd be very easy for this fabric to have lots of wrinkles in it because we're going around a column. So you just want to make sure, the main thing is you want to make sure that it's pulled tight the entire time, that it's nice and secure. And now we're going to add the nails every probably 4 to 6 inches because now it's more of a design thing than anything. You want it to stay tight, but you also want it to look good. So we've got a nice clean edge, and we're putting the finishing nails in, and they've got a cool decorative quality to them. Meanwhile, my job is just to make sure that everything is pulled taut while we're doing it. There we go. Now we got this nice clean edge. It's nice and wrinkle-free all the way around. And now we are going to take our staple gun and we're going to get a nice clean edge and staple it all to the inside concrete form. And now we're just going to fold this up and staple it directly into the concrete form. If you overlap it a little bit, it helps pull it tight, and whoever's helping you can be the hands to help turn the column. And then after this, you just flip around and do the other side the same way. Alright, so now we've got our absorption panels on either side of the dowel. It's nice and secure, the glue has dried. We've pre-drilled a hole in the end of each side of the dowel to make sure it doesn't split when we screw into it. And now we're going to screw the end cap on. We have fun.
It finally showed up.
Good, that's nice and flat. Alright, and now we have a solid end cap, and this will stand up and it's nice and secure. So now we're going to put our trap over the top. There, and now we just need to put the final end cap on and we are done. We have laid down glue on top as well as on the top of the dowel, and we're going to screw this final end cap on. That's good. And we've done it! We now have a completed tube trap, and we can use these two tube traps on top of each other. They're both stable, but they can both be independent. You can put these as one column in each corner of your room or on different sides of where you're recording in order to provide that active absorption that you need in order to have a truly exceptionally sounding room. Thank you so much, guys. I am Jordan. My friend Corey here. Thank you so much, dude. And we'll see you next time. I'm Jordan with SOS Studio.
See you guys.
You had to get the final word, didn't you? Hey guys, I hope you got a lot out of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel or check out our newsletter where we put out a blog, a podcast, and DIY tips for the independent artist and songwriter. Thank you so much.